Hi everyone, thanks for joining me today. We're looking out onto Slocan Lake. We're facing north right now. And we're going to be going from Slocan, or as it used to be called, Slocan City, and we'll be driving north to a place called Silverton. We'll be taking Highway 6 the whole way, basically, once we get out of town here. So Silverton was a big town for the silver mines in the local area and up the lake. Silver and gold. There were a few gold mines too. But what they had is a sternwheeler on the lake, and it would travel up and down, because there weren't any roads at that time, a few trails, up and down the lake, and they'd transport miners and goods, and they'd even tie, later they would even tie barges to the sternwheeler and use it like a tug and bring rail cars up and down the lake. And I'll tell you a little story about that. It's an old kind of lost treasure story, I guess, related to that. I'll mention that later on. I'll give you the details on that. And found some footage that I don't know if it might be helpful for somebody to actually find it now. But anyway, I'll give you details on that once we get closer to Silverton. So this town doesn't really look anything like it did back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. All those buildings have pretty much since gone, I believe. But the roads all remain, and there's you can see how wide the streets are in that here too, which is kind of interesting for an old town. But from what I remember reading, was there's a lot of wagon traffic to and from the sternwheeler and the rail cars and that, and they were moving a lot of stuff in and out, and they didn't want any traffic jams for the wagons as they were loaded. But so this was also the terminus for the CPR rail line at the beginning, and that's why they ended up putting the sternwheeler in. The sternwheeler was actually called the Slocan, so it would carry on as the main mode of transportation up the lake when the rail line stopped here at that time. Super nice area. It's just yeah, it's really neat, really quiet, peaceful. And there's Slocan Lake drains into Slocan River, which heads south and joins up with Kootenay River at a point that's about halfway between Castlegar and Nelson. I mentioned that in the last video, but just so you get a bit of an idea. And if you go further past Silverton, where we're going to end today, it goes up to a place called New Denver, which is also pretty famous for mines and treasures and gold and silver. I think there was I think there's a massive silver boulder they found. I have a picture of it. I'll probably include in it. Probably the next video we'll head up that way. But there's also another kind of historic town called Sandon, just east of New Denver. So anyway, this is Highway 6. It's a really nice drive, and it gets really high in a few places, and it winds along the lake. It's a pretty windy road, but really good to drive on. I think it would be probably a good road if you had motorcycles or cars. If you like windy roads, and there's nobody on it. This is beginning of October right now, so there's hardly anybody on this road. Maybe around lunchtime or something. Can't remember. So right now there'll be a lot of snow here. This area gets a lot of snow. So it's a pretty short mining season when they were prospecting and that. So yeah, you can imagine trying to do some of that in the winter would be pretty much impossible. These mountains are really steep. The one on the right here, yeah, it's almost vertical in places for hundreds and hundreds of feet. can see why they had such a hard time putting a road in. And when you see gates like this, it's usually an indication that there's potential for a lot of rock slides or avalanches in the wintertime. Pretty common thing. So there's a series of those gates along here, so when they had a problem they drop the gates, stop traffic till they get it cleaned up, which could take, you know, considerable amount of time depending on how bad it was. So this area was referred to as Silvery Slocan because it was primarily silver mining for the most part, until you get really high in elevation. Then you get into some of the gold mines. There was just like a strip of this bluish quartz. I remember reading about bluish colored quartz that had gold in it. So that was a big indicator for the gold in this particular area. Yeah, you can see just how steep everything is on the right here. See how high that? Yeah, it's like vertical in places. And we're already quite a ways up from the lake. You can see it down there on the left. Yeah, this would have been quite an undertaking to build this road. On this stretch that we're going, there's actually a couple of rest stops, I think, too, which seems pretty rare in a lot of the highways. Maybe because this is an older one. They used to do more of that. Probably less towns and gas stations for people to stop at, and the vehicles being a little more susceptible to altitude and temperature. They probably needed to have places for people to stop occasionally, depending on what the weather was doing. Yeah, you can see how nice the lake is. Just get glimpses of it, but it's just flat calm today. So Slocan Lake has some trout in it, and also Dolly Varden, I think, is in there. But the trout, they can get pretty big in this lake. I remember just a few years ago, somebody I knew said that they caught a 19-pound rainbow trout in this lake. So that goes back to a few videos I did, probably a couple months ago now, an area called Trout Lake, which is north of here, and there's a strain of trout that kind of come from there, Gerard strain, and typically massive fish, and that's probably what's in here. Some of that wild strain is probably still surviving. I'm sure that's being stocked right now with kind of more typical kind of trout, because you do catch a number that are in, you know, maybe the 12 to 15 inch kind of size, but to get some of these massive salmon sized ones out of here, but it is a big lake, so it's potential to be you get into a lot of trouble out there if you didn't have a big decent boat. And if you do fish it, there's not a lot of structure, because you can imagine how steep the drop-offs are on the lake as well, so there's not a lot of shallow areas to fish with insect patterns, that sort of thing. So you're probably going to fish the creek mouths and that sort of thing. all around the lake. That would be the best bet. Some of the trees have some color to them. Like I say, it is beginning of October. When I did this trip, I kind of thought they'd be further along than they are, but it's kind of one of those things that, you know, overnight it'll just change because it gets cold pretty fast. Can't imagine being a prospector and fighting through this dense forest up these super steep mountains looking. Yeah, just it's pretty amazing. Can you imagine how much this stuff they missed? Because apparently the silver ore in this area, sometimes it's right on the surface, other times they go down quite a ways, but it tends to be in little pockets, like dense little circles kind of this ore. It's not strewn across a certain layer. You just randomly find these pockets. So there's lots of stories of these guys mining and going down and not finding anything, and then somebody else takes the claim and goes like just a few feet away from where they did their shaft. They'll put another one in and they'll hit some massive amount of silver ore just because it's really patchy, and you might find if you're lucky, find a clump like that. But so this has potential for a lot more kind of strikes, silver strikes in this area, I would imagine. But pretty cost prohibitive for small operations. It's just the terrain. Look at that tree. It stands out. I've seen a couple that we went by that were quite red too. Quite a little 90-degree corner here, almost. It just loops around. Yeah, and you might see logging trucks along here. Can't imagine driving a logging truck down some of these steep roads around here. Oh, I should probably say, let you know that my camera hangs off the side of my truck, so it looks like I'm driving over the line, but it's just a perspective thing. It's actually, I'm actually well within the lines, and every once in a while you see my hood kind of way on the right there, just pop up. And give you an idea where the actual truck is. Yeah, there's one of your rest areas there. Some picnic tables and that. So I mentioned in a previous video, I mentioned a book called Old Silverton, British Columbia, from 1891 to 1930. And it's a book that was put out by the Silverton Historical Society, written by John Norris. I'll put a picture of what it looks like here. Now, I've had this book for probably, 30 years at least. But I was watching, I don't remember how I got it, but I was watching a Gold Trails and Ghost Towns episode where they were talking about Silverton, and it mentions this book and some of the stories in it. But I'll put a link to that video. And that's also the same video that at the end is going to show, or it's going to talk about a treasure that was lost. Not really a treasure, I guess it was more just a silver ore was lost in Silverton, right in Silverton, off one of these barges they load the rail cars onto. So apparently in the video, Bill Barley, he mentions that it was around 1916, I think, and it was ore from one of the bigger mines called the Standard Mine. They'd lost 4 or 5 of these rail cars off of one of the barges that they would tie to the side of the sternwheeler. And it was because it was winter time, and he says that they loaded the barges, or that loaded the barge kind of heavy on one side, and it was winter time and they were getting sloppy or whatever, but these cars rolled right off the end of the barge into the lake, and nobody ever did anything about it. It was just kind of one of those, lost that because it's quite deep there. Anyway, I've always thought that was one that just kind of stuck in my head, so I went looking for the video on that, talking about that. And anyway, he happened to be talking about that old book as well, the old Silverton book. So I don't know if I got that after talking to him or watching the video, or if I bought it when it came out in 86, I think. 85 or 86. And I don't think they've done another printing of it, but you can find it on eBay and that. But anyway, I've since found a video of somebody that dove in where the CPR dock is outside of Silverton. Silverton's very, very small. So you'll see when you get to town there, it's only a few streets long. But where the dock was, and where they were loading these rail cars on and off, it's a very small area, but it's quite steep and underwater. But I found a video of some divers going looking at stuff. They're finding wheelbarrows and all kinds of things there. And they come across a bunch of rail cars. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever got the treasure out of there. He mentions in the video that there was a couple guys in the 80s or something that went looking for it. He didn't think that they ever found them. But anyway, these guys that were diving on it, I think it was 2015, the video. Put a picture of it up there. You can see that's a video capture showing the bottom of one of the rail cars. But I would be interested in, if I had scuba gear and was a diver, I would go and just take some of the rocks and sample them, because they'll be covered in silt and stuff and look like anything, but just see if there is all this silver ore, because silver has gone up even from the 80s when Bill Barley was doing that show. It's considerably higher. Probably, a couple $100,000 then, it's probably $1 million now. But anyway, interesting thing to check out. So this is Silverton now. So I think there might be a few buildings that are original. But you can see it's not very long. Where the bridge is up ahead there, straight ahead, that's a bridge going over the Silverton Creek, I think. And that's basically the end of town. So to the left here is a couple blocks, and then you get to the lake. But I think this is where we'll end this one. Check out the links for those videos in the description. You just click on them, it'll take you straight there. But other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.